Hello and good morning. It is the middle of January 2025. I'm Kim and I'm so glad you're here today. This is sort of the kickoff video of the year, isn't it? It is going to be all about what I'm planning as far as reading goes for the year 2025. And I'm very excited about this coming year because I have all kinds of fun stuff planned. And, considering how 2024 went, I am very confident and very much looking forward to 2025 going just as well. So my main reading goal in 2024 was to get back into reading, which I did, and I'm so glad that I chose to focus on that in the summer and fall last year. And then I went ahead and started a BookTube channel, actively making videos for 2 months now, and I'm very much enjoying it and very much enjoying the whole BookTube community. So yeah, I was very pleased with how 2024 went as far as reading goes, and I just did the first video of 2025 last week, which was about how 2024 went for me. After I did that video, I realized, looking back on it, that it came across pretty sci-fi heavy. And I do love sci-fi, but the fact is I'm quite a balanced reader, or at least that is definitely my overarching goal. I have so many different genres that I love to read that I usually try to keep things somewhat balanced so that, I don't go off and just binge one genre all year. And I didn't really do that with sci-fi, but it just so happened that a lot of the sci-fi books and series I read last year turned out to be great favorites of mine. So I did talk about them a lot in my 2024 wrap up. But yeah, if you happen upon any one particular video of mine or of other content creators here on BookTube, you might get the wrong impression that perhaps they mostly read one particular genre. So I encourage you to watch several videos, not just of mine, but of other content creators that you come across that you think, well, I kind of like their style, but I don't really read that type of book. Well, check out their other videos, their backlist of videos, because you might be surprised to find out, oh, they actually read this and this too, and I love those. Now, moving into 2025, what are my big goals for this coming year? Well, I think the main one is kind of vague, kind of general, but important to me. And that is that my BookTube channel be very much reflective of me. And I think it has so far in the few videos I've done, but only in a limited way. So I want to bring in some things that I haven't yet focused on much and share about them a lot more. Okay, so something I tried for a few videos in 2024 that I decided, I don't really like the way that worked, so I'm not going to do that going forward. And that is weekly reading updates. I found those kind of videos made me feel a bit pressured to read when perhaps I wasn't in the mood for reading. And I also, more importantly probably, felt like when I talked about a book as I was reading it on a week-to-week basis, I felt like I was repeating myself a lot. And by the time it came to the end of the month and I wanted to talk about the book as a whole, I felt like I've kind of already covered all this and this feels redundant and not as exciting as it would have if I'd kept it till now. So going forward, I'm going to do monthly reading reflections covering all the books I read over the course of the previous month, except special books that fit into personal project categories, but we'll get into that in a minute. So monthly reading reflections. I feel like that's a good fit for me, so that's what I'm going to be doing to cover the books I read each month. The second thing I'm going to be doing in 2025 with my reading and my channel is to read more nature books. Now, I always read a lot of nature books, actually, but I'm planning to read even more because I love nature so much. I do. I mean, that's how I got started on YouTube in the first place, was with a gardening channel that I started 4 years ago. And I have huge gardens and a couple of orchards, a fruit and nut orchard and an olive orchard. And I love to propagate and I mostly love to experiment. Yeah, so nature has always been a passion of mine, most definitely over the last 10 years. And now I want to branch out from my own property and do a lot more focused and planned explorations into nature, such as nature parks, nature hiking trails, maybe bird watching. I have all sorts of ideas, but mostly for this year, the expansion part of nature that I'm going to be covering will be the nature parks. And I'm certainly going to try to bring that into my reading and share with you the great nature books that I find along the way. Now, when I first started this channel, I mentioned that I am a writer and that I was going to bring some of my writing content to the BookTube channel. And I have not done that yet. And that was purposeful. I didn't intend to start talking about my writing until this year at some point. So that is going to come into the channel this year. I have some ideas about how I want to talk about it. And I'm going to have fun with it. And if you aren't interested in writing content, you can just skip those videos. But if you are interested in writing and about taking all your previous writing experience, and it might be broad and varied as mine has been, and finally doing the one thing you haven't done yet, which is publishing books, well, then you might be interested in my journey, because it is definitely a big focus of mine this year to write a lot more and with a lot more specific intentions as far as publishing goes. Now, my fourth focus in reading in 2025 is going to be to revisit some of my very favorite cozy mystery series. Now, I started reading cozy mysteries way back when. We're talking about when they first started. I was on board with Joanne Vlug's first book and all the other old cozy mystery series, whether it's the Gaslight mystery series or the Molly Murphy mystery series. Yep, I've got the entire series collected here because I was reading them as they came out, every new release. But it's been a long time since I read some of my favorite series. So this year I am going to be hopefully revisiting them. And what I intend to do is to take 4 series and start them over, read book 1 from each of those 4 series, then read book 2 from each of those series, and that way none of them gets neglected. So what are the 4 that I've chosen? Well, probably one of my all-time favorites. I've got the Bibliophile Mystery Series by Kate Carlisle. This features Brooklyn Wainwright, who is a old book restorer, and it is a very, very funny series and very interesting series. I learned a lot reading this, and I was very entertained, and I can't wait to start reading it again. Currently, it has 17 books in it, so I don't think I'm going to get through them all this year for sure, but maybe it's a project that will take me a few years to finish all 4 of these series. The next series I'm going to revisit is the Grace and Favor series by Jill Churchill. Now, this is set in 1929, just after the economic crash that started the Great Depression here in the States, and it features Lily and Robert Brewster, siblings who were members of, we shall say, the idle rich, who suddenly are now quite poor. They make a great pair and, of course, set about solving mysteries that come their way. Now, I don't really remember any details about this series. That's what's fun about going back and reading something you read 15, 20 years ago, is that it's all new to you, or at least to me. That's how my brain works. I do remember overall, I love the feel of this book. I love the characters, and I loved the very lighthearted, funny tone. And yet it was set in a period of history that you don't really see a lot of books set in, and I enjoyed that a lot. Now, the third cozy mystery series I'm going to be revisiting is actually not an older one. The first book, let's see, it was published in 2017, so it's only 7 years old. And this is the Winnie Archer Bread Shop Mystery Series. And the first one is Kneaded to Death. And it is set in California at a Mexican bread shop. And I love this series. It is just so good. I mean, I love a lot of bake shop mysteries, but this one, the character development from book to book is fabulous. And it's just a very interesting, great series to read. So I'm really looking forward to getting to this one this year. And it's another one I might finish because it doesn't have as many as some of the others. And the fourth one is, I'll just put a picture of it here because it's packed away at the moment. I'm going to have to dig them out because I haven't read them in so long. But it's the Elizabeth Peters, Amelia Peabody mystery series set in Egypt with a woman and a man archaeologist and their friends. And wow, the setting of this one is great. And being a lifelong archaeology lover, I loved the theme of it. And the characters are fun. And, you know, they interact together in a really bantering way. And yeah, I just love this series for so many reasons. So looking forward to getting back to it. Now, what is the fifth and perhaps to me the most exciting reading plan I have for 2025? It is my personal reading projects. Yes, there are also a few group reading projects, some BookTube community projects that I will get involved with. Some of those are quarterly, even year-long, a couple are monthly, and I'll just be talking about them as the year goes by. But the three projects that I am absolutely the most excited about are my three personal reading projects. And what are they? First up is what I have nicknamed the British History Project. Now, the reason that's a nickname is, of course, I'm not covering the entirety of British history. What I'm covering is very specific and very, very messy. More technically, I could call it the Long Plantagenet Era from 1066 to 1485, otherwise known as From the Anarchy to the Tudors, or From Hastings to Bosworth. More casually, I could call it Why So Many Henrys and Edwards. Now, I've been fascinated with this era of British history since I was a teenager. I read a lot of books about the Plantagenets back then, and I haven't touched that period since. I do know a lot about it. Mostly, I know random facts and stories, and they're all very interesting. The reason that I know so much about it is probably because I have a child, well, my oldest child, so she's, not a kid anymore, that's for sure, but she has a PhD in British history from Stanford, no less, and she's lived in London and studied so much, and she's a great storyteller. So I have heard so many stories about this period that I wanted to learn more. I wanted to really investigate further, really explore all the nooks and crannies of it. Well, obviously I can't do all that in 1 year, but I can get started. And so she helped me come up with a plan. First of all, I told her I had to have timelines with names and dates because I need something to hang all the stories on so that I understand context and don't get lost, which would be very easy to do in this period of history. So she did make me a nice timeline, actually 2 of them, for Christmas, and bought me several of the books I want to be reading for this project too. So on my bedroom door now, I have these 2 timelines, which are going to be so helpful to me. So the first book I'm reading in my British History Project is, of course, The White Ship by Charles Spencer. And this medieval Titanic event that happened in 1120. Well, you can't really start a study of the whole Plantagenet era without studying the precursor to it. Where else could I start but with this event? And this author does an awesome job. The historical research is impeccable, and his style of writing is compelling, and, the content. What set off all the events, the Civil War that led to the anarchy, through the anarchy, to the dawn of the Tudors is just page-turning reading, and I'm all there for it. I've also got a few books on hand that give me the background info I need to help me from getting lost. So in addition to the timelines my daughter made for me, I've got DK's Kings and Queens of England book, which has additional very specialized timelines and some, snippet biographies of important people within the history I'll be reading through. I've also got Royal Panoply, Brief Lives of the English Monarchs by Carolee Erickson. And this one is sort of an expanded version of the the decay. And what this one does is it gives me chapters on each of the monarchs. They might be 8 pages or 18 pages, but they're very focused, bringing forth all the specific events and occurrences that need to be highlighted about that particular monarch's reign, but also their lives, not just the time they were ruling. This actually covers a lot more than the time period I'm studying, but I will definitely find it very useful. And then I've got a fun social history called The Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England, a handbook for visitors to the 14th century by Ian Mortimer. And this is just going to give me a lot of practical and fun info on, what the average person at that time was doing. What were their jobs? What were they wearing? What were they eating? What did they do for entertainment? And I definitely like to have a broad view of any period of history I'm studying, so I know that this will come in handy for that. After I read The White Ship, I will be taking on Dan Jones' The Plantagenets, the warrior kings and queens who made England. This says the first Plantagenet kings inherited a blood-soaked realm from the Normans and transformed it into an empire that stretched at its peak from Scotland to Jerusalem. In this epic narrative history of courage, treachery, ambition, and deception, Dan Jones resurrects the unruly royal dynasty that preceded the Tudors. They produced England's best and worst kings, Henry II and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine, twice a queen and the most famous woman in Christendom, their son Richard the Lionheart, who fought Saladin in the Third Crusade, and his conniving brother King John, who was forced to grant his people new rights under the Magna Carta, the basis for our own Bill of Rights. Combining the latest academic research with a gift for storytelling, Jones vividly recreates the great battles of Bannockburn, Crecy, and Sluis, and I have no idea if I'm saying those things right, and reveals how the maligned kings, Edward II and Richard II, met their downfalls. This is the era of chivalry and the Black Death, the Knights of Templar, the founding of Parliament, and the 100 Years' War, when England's national identity was forged by the sword. That just sounds awesome. And cannot read and study and explore this period of history without reading Sharon Penman. And the first book of hers I will be reading is When Christ and His Saints Slept, beginning with 1135 CE. As church bells toll for the death of England's King Henry I, his barons face the unwelcome prospect of being ruled by a woman, Henry's beautiful daughter Maud, Countess of Anjou. But before Maud can claim her throne, her cousin Stephen seizes it. In their long and bitter struggle, all of England will bleed and burn. Now, I've got just about all of Penman's books in this particular series. I also have some of her medieval mysteries, which I hope to read along with these. And this is definitely a year or two or maybe more project because I have a feeling I'm just going to keep going. If anyone is interested in reading some of these books or all of these books along with me, let me know. And in my first specific video to the British History Project, the Long Plantagenet Era, I will include a reading list so that you can pick and choose or read all of them along with me. My second personal reading project for 2025 is one that is close to my heart because it's very directly related to my writing. So I am actually writing a historical fiction series set in the mid-19th century in Northern California at the time of the California Gold Rush. Living in Northern California all my life, I have been able to visit many of the old mining towns and see firsthand not only the places but many of the artifacts from that time period, and I've always been fascinated by it. And I do have the first book in this series that I'm writing done, the first draft anyway, and so this year my goal is to finish that draft and get it published and then outline the second book, at least if not the third also. So directly related to that, I wanted to motivate myself and enjoy myself reading in full many of the California history books set in this time period that I have been collecting for the last 2 decades, I guess. And I have read portions of many of them in my research for my writing. but I want to now read them from beginning to end, many of them during this year-long project. So I'm starting off with a book by Stephen G. Hislop, Contest for California from Spanish Colonization to the American Conquest. Now, Stephen Hislop is an expert in California history and is very careful and thorough with his academic research on what he's writing about. The back of the book says that in vivid detail, Hislop traces the story of early California from its founding in 1769 by Spanish colonists to its annexation in 1848 by the United States. Yes, 1848. Coincidentally, just before the California Gold Rush. He describes the motivations and activities of colonizers and colonized alike. Using eyewitness accounts, he allows all participants, Native American, Spanish, Mexican, and Anglo-American, to have their say. Soldiers, settlers, missionaries, and merchants testified to the heroic and commonplace, the colorful and tragic, in California's pre-American history. Even as he acknowledges the dark side of this story, Hislop avoids a simplistic perspective. He offers nuanced portraits of controversial figures and treats the Californios with the respect lacking in earlier histories. Attentive to the tensions within the invading groups, Hislop also never loses sight of their impact on the original inhabitants of the region, California's native peoples. So this is like the perfect history of the time period that I'm studying and that I've set my novels in. And I find this kind of nonfiction narrative history absolutely fascinating. And I can just not put it down once I start it if it's well written, as this one is. I've already started it. Now, Contest for California is actually book 2 of a multi-book series called Before Gold, California Under Spain and Mexico. And this is volume 2. It has 6, or sometimes you'll see it listed as 7 volumes in this series, and I want to read several of them. I right now own 2 of them. The reason it's sometimes listed as 6 and sometimes as 7 is because the book 6 is actually a 2-volume set. So this is volume 7, but sometimes it's listed as part 2 of volume 6. And it is Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo, Life in Spanish, Mexican, and American California. This is the one I will be reading after A Contest for California. Now, Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo was born in 1807, died in 1890, and he grew up in Spanish California, became a leading military and political figure in Mexican California, and participated in some of the founding events of U.S. California. In 1874 and 75, Vallejo, commissioned by historian and publisher Hubert Howe Bancroft, composed a 5-volume history of Alta California. Alta just means Upper California. It was a monumental work that would be the most complete account of California before the gold rush by someone who actually lived there at the time. But Bancroft found the work to be at odds with the American triumphalism that he touted, so he consigned it to the archives. There it remained until its recent publication as Recuerdos, Historical and Personal Remembrances Relating to Alta California, 1769 to 1849, which was translated and edited by Rose Marie Beebe and Robert M. Sinquez. Now, in the second part of that book, the authors illuminate not only Vallejo's life and history, but also examine the broader experience of 19th century California communities. Drawing on Vallejo's Recuerdos, his voluminous papers and correspondence, and additional documents collected by members of his family over the decades, the book's essays consider Spanish and Mexican rule in California, mission secularization, the rise of rancho culture, and the conflicts between settlers and indigenous Californians, especially in the post-mission era. As a prisoner in the Bear Flag Movement in 1846, as a participant in the Constitutional Convention of 1849 and the first legislature in 1850, and a landowner forced to confront the California Land Act of 1851, Vallejo was uniquely positioned to provide insight into early California's foundation. As a defender of culture and education among Mexican Californians, he also offers a rare perspective of the cultural life of the Mexican-American community. Finally, the authors include a significant portion of the correspondence between Vallejo and his wife, Francisca Benicia, for what it reveals about the effect of the American conquest on family and gender roles. So, that is going to be an excellent book to read too, both for my own personal enjoyment and for the enrichment to my own writing in that era. Now, many of the other books in that series, Before Gold, California Under Spain and Mexico, cover things that were happening in Southern California, which is quite a ways away from what was going on up here in the north, where I happen to live now and where my books are going to be focused. But in addition to the two books I've just shared with you, there's one other book in the series that I do find the topic very interesting. It's called Colonial Intimacies, Interethnic Kinship, Sexuality and Marriage in Southern California, 1769 to 1885. So the time period's right, the topic is right, but it's Southern California. I went and found a book that seems very similar to this one as far as the subject goes, but it is focused on Northern California. In fact, it's focused right on a particular city of great interest to me, San Francisco. So it's called The Archaeology of Ethnogenesis, Race and Sexuality in Colonial San Francisco by Barbara L. Voss. And I think this is going to directly and significantly inform some of what I'm going to be writing about in my books. And as an aside, just truly interesting to learn about. So my goal for the California History Project is to read these history books this year, as well as some specific nonfiction history books that cover particular people, particular topics, and I have a lot of them on a couple of shelves behind me and on another bookcase entirely. I also want to read, though, a variety of fiction books, novels set in this time period in California history. So I have quite a few of those lined up. Now, the first one of those I'm going to be reading is a recent debut novel, highly awarded, by C. Pam Zhang, called How Much of These Hills is Gold? And it's about two young Chinese siblings who are orphaned and find themselves on the run, looking for a way to find a life in the mining communities of Northern California at the end of the gold rush. This book explores what it was like for the Chinese at the time of the Exclusionary Act, how difficult life was for them, and especially for young people as they're already struggling with self-identity, to also face being told that, they didn't deserve to live where they were. They didn't deserve to have a home in this country. From what I've heard, this book does an excellent job exploring race and exploring what it means to be an immigrant in a new world, as well as more personal topics such as family memories and how they can hold us together or perhaps tear us apart. And I am really looking forward to reading this book. I believe what I'm going to try to do throughout the year is each month do a video that is half about the British History Project and half about my California History Project. And that way, if you're interested in both, you can watch the whole video. But if you just have an interest in one or the other, you can watch that part. Because to me, although they're in completely different time periods and completely different parts of the world, they're both about exciting times in history. And so not only do I find both of these topics and eras interesting, I think a lot of people who love history will find them both interesting as well. Now, my last personal reading project for 2025 is what I'm calling an in-depth author study, and I'm going to be doing 4 of them. The first author I'm going to be studying is Charlotte Bronte. So what I'm going to be doing for these author studies is, of course, reading many of their works, if not all of them. And several of these authors have written in a broad variety of genres, at least 2 distinct ones, if not more. And so that will be fun to explore. And then I'm also going to be reading biographies, autobiographies, memoirs, and sometimes related fiction. And we'll see that when it comes to Charlotte Bronte. So obviously I'll be reading Jane Eyre. Now, I read it, of course, as a kid, an abridged version then, and I absolutely adored it and was so excited when, as a teen, I found out there was more to the story. And I'm really looking forward to revisiting it, seeing what I think of it now. and I will be reading many of her other works too. In addition, I'll be reading several different biographies of Charlotte Bronte, and I found this book called The Bronte Myth by Lucasta Miller, which goes into exploring the world of all three sisters, Charlotte, Anne, and Emily, and sort of figuring out what about what we know of them is actually true, what might be true, and what definitely is a myth. And also sort of discussing the overarching aura that surrounds the Brontes, what it means about them and what it means about us in today's age as readers. And then something I've never done before, but I'm going to try just for fun. I'm reading a tie-in novel. It's called The Secret Adventures of Charlotte Bronte by Laura Jo Rowland. It says that upon learning she had been falsely accused of breaching her contract, the normally mild-mannered Charlotte Bronte, author of Jane Eyre, sets off for London to clear her name. But when she unintentionally witnesses a murder, Charlotte finds herself embroiled in a dangerous chain of events. With the clandestine aid of the other Bronte sisters, Emily and Anne, and of the suspiciously well-informed but irresistibly attractive brother of the victim, Charlotte works to unravel a deadly web of intrigue that threatens not only her own safety, but the very fabric of the British Empire. Wow, the stakes are high here. Will Charlotte be able to stop a devious villain whose schemes endanger her life, her family, and her country? It says that the author's Sano Inchiro detective novels have enthralled legions of readers, and now she turns her gift for historical fiction to Victorian England and the famous, fascinating Bronte family with this critically acclaimed new thriller. Now, like I said, I usually avoid tie-in books like this like the plague, but this one really intrigues me, and I'm going to give it a try. Now, the other two authors I'm definitely going to be studying this year on a quarterly basis are Emily Dickinson and George Orwell. The last one, the fourth, is 90% likely, and it's a more recent author, one who's still living, and that is Amy Stewart, who has written a wide variety of genres as well as intriguing and interesting nonfiction. So I am really excited about covering these authors and enjoying them from many different angles and sharing what I learn and what I love with you. So those are my 3 personal projects that I've already started on and I'm already enjoying. I really think 2025 is going to be a fantastic reading year just based on those personal projects alone, because I'm so interested in what I'm going to be reading within them. But also, of course, because I'm going to keep reading all the other genres I love to read. Now, I'm also looking forward to participating on some level in several different BookTube group projects, group read-alongs. The first of those is Historathon. I did this last year and loved it. Definitely doing it all 4 quarters this year. Now, Historathon, it's about helping others understand how great, how fun, how enlightening, how pleasurable reading nonfiction history can be. So Vin from Revenant Reads is the one who started this. It's actually only in its 3rd year, believe it or not. And the project is divided into 4 quarters, with the first quarter, which started in January, being set aside for nonfiction history that covers prehistory all the way through the ancients. So I will be doing a separate video that talks about what I am reading for quarter 1 Historathon. Some of the other group read-alongs I'm participating in are Page Turners with Katja, and I'm doing both her global fictions and her global classics for 2025. And I'm not going to be reading every single book every single month from both of these read-alongs, but I do intend to read anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 in each of these different read-alongs. And I'm already gathering the books, and I'm already really looking forward to it. Another read-along I'm going to be participating in is Foodie February, which was started last year by the Untrained Librarian, who has a great channel. Go check it out. And last year I read several good books for this, and I already have several books I'm thinking of reading next month for this read-along. I'm also dipping in and out of Angelia's read-along Endless Drama. She has a Discord for this too, and you can check out her announcement video on her channel, Read and Reread. This month in January, we read Pygmalion and are currently reading RUR, and that is all about the first robots. I'm sure there will be several other monthly read-alongs that I will want to participate in throughout the year, like maybe Victober, June on the Range, Pride Month. And if I'm not too busy in those months with my other reading and my other obligations, I will definitely be participating in some of those. So thank you for sticking around for this long video, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about what I'm planning to read this year. I would be very interested in hearing what you are planning to read this year. Are there any specific authors or subjects you want to explore? Are you planning to reread some old favorites? Are you really into some new releases? I know I have some of those I'm anxiously awaiting. I just want to know, what are you reading? Let me know in the comments below.